Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Cox and Crendor, where we are sitting down with the grand poobah of World of Warcraft himself, Ion Hazzikostas. Hello.
Hey guys, great to be here with you.
You say that. Yeah, you say that like a man who is not ready for the questions we're going to ask you. I'm so sorry. This is.
I'm looking forward to it. We'll see. We'll see what I'm saying afterwards. But for now, I'm happy to be here with you guys.
The minute that camera goes off, you'll be like, "What did you do, John?" We know he's in that room. He won't make himself revealed to the camera, but we know he's there.
You can see like one curl just kind of hanging in the corner of the screen. But yeah.
Okay. So jumping right into this, man, I know that we were going to sit down to talk about 7.2, and then 7.3 drops on PTR today, and the world loses its mind, and new character models exist, and people are going nutso, and so we're going to try and stay focused, but I want you to know, deep down inside of me is someone with a lot of lore questions who's like,
Yep.
So I'm going to try to be reserved and try to march forward, and hopefully Crendor can keep me on topic. Probably not. We're screwed. Okay.
I got a few 7.2 questions, so we'll balance it out.
There we go. All right. You know what? Before we even start, though, I know a lot of people right off the gate. I know the internet. You know the internet. I know how this is going to work. The minute we're sitting down to talk about WoW today, this guy's already like, people still play WoW? First off, who are you, internet weirdo? Second off, I love to ask this question at the start of every interview because I like the idea of seeing where your heads are at as devs when it comes to something like this. For someone who genuinely has an interest in World of Warcraft and maybe jumping into the game now, even though it's been out for quite some time, as we ramp up in one of, I would say, the best expansions in a long time, with more content than ever and so many fun things to do with friends or by yourself, as we approach patch 7.3, as we approach the end of the expansion, what would you say to someone who is thinking, well, I want to get in, but is it too late?
It is our most ambitious expansion in a lot of ways, and I think with a lot of the the patch plan that we've been delivering, the 7.3 patch that just hit PTR, like it's a patch to the game, but we're taking you to a whole new world and trying to tell a story on a grander scale than we have in the past. There's a ton of catch-up mechanisms. You can jump right into the action if you want to. Don't worry about being, having fallen behind. And the game is there and waiting for you. There's, never been a better time to check it out.
Yeah, I would agree. Also, very biased. So I'll let Eric ask a question now. We'll just switch back and forth if that's cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I'll bring it back to 7.2. So I'm a big fan of the little things you can do in the game that kind of, not like, oh, I went on an epic raid. We're like, oh, I went to a balloon festival. So you've added a lot of events this past just patch in general, like Sporagar, the balloon festival, the boat festival. And I'm curious as to what your plans are going forward with those. Would you consider making them longer than what they are, or is it just specifically, for example, like Sporagar was only a day? Would you consider making that 2 days going forward if they do really well, or is it more just 1 day things?
Potentially. I think, some of them have different lengths depending on what lends itself best to the amount of content that's there. I think the one that kicked off the whole system in Shar'Thos, sort of the celebration of the anniversary of the opening of Ahn'Qiraj, that was a multi-day event. The transmog holiday that we have coming up, that's also a multi-day event. There are some things that are just much lighter and don't make sense to sort of stretch out over multiple days. And again, it's all part of a recurring calendar. These aren't ever meant to be one-time events. Some of them occur a couple times a year. And so if you miss it, it'll be back.
Okay.
Speaking of events, I think the big takeaway that I've had from Legion so far is that everything feels not only event based, but also it feels like you're testing things, and because this is what I've sort of learned from WoW in the past, is that every expansion has that, we're going to try something new, and if it works, you'll see a bigger version of it next expansion, but if it doesn't, we're gonna scrap that. And so things like the mage tower and the command center and the disruptor and things like that, is that something that you view as a test for moving forward and things you might do in the future? Or is that, like, how do you view that? Because that's when I see that, I'm like, oh, this is them trying to see if this works on a grander scale later on.
For a long time now, we've had content that's on some sort of rotating cycle, whether it's, the world bosses are up every other week, or this week is Mythic Dungeon week, and next week is going to be Battleground week, and then the week after that is Pet Battle week. And I think we were trying to have some variation to what content was available on a given day or a given week in Broken Shore, or what buffs you had, and wanted to try experimenting with a more player-driven organic system that, sort of helped tell the story a little bit of our efforts building up a base and trying to build a bulwark as part of the Legion Fall offensive, and put it a bit in players' hands. And yes, I mean, the reality is the contributions are tuned such that we sort of know we can look at, in a given region, this is about how many contributions are made every day. We know that on average it's going to take 5 or 6 days to build one of these, but not always. There's an ebb and flow, and sometimes there's a really exciting bonus up next. You'll see players rush to complete a given building because they want their legendary equipment or they want their artifact power bonus or whatever. Or early on, the Mage Tower Challenge, when that was like something everyone was really chomping at the bit to jump into and try, every time Mage Tower was up, that would become the number one priority for the entire region. Stuff like that, it's cool. It lends itself to the feeling like you're part of a multiplayer world, even if your individual contribution isn't noticeably moving the meter. It's not just some abstract game schedule. It's everybody in North America working to build this thing or build that thing. So it's not necessarily something we're going to always carry forward in that exact form. There's nothing like this on Argus, for example, in 7.3, but it's definitely one of those sort of lessons learned, a bit of new tech that we got to track and coordinate region-wide contributions. So if we ever wanted to do something like this, if we ever wanted to do something like, whatever the modern version of the Ahn'Qiraj war effort would be, for example, we've learned a lot of lessons of how that would work, have better tech to make it happen.
Okay. I know you mentioned world bosses as well, and I've seen people complain that the loot of the world bosses hasn't been updated to standard. So I'm curious if you're updating the world boss loot or making it more difficult in order to up the raid loot.
Not really. I mean, the Broken Shore world bosses drop better loot than the prior ones. There could be new world bosses in Argus that drop even better loot. We kind of see those as an extension of raid tiers. We haven't gone back and made the loot from Emerald Nightmare or from Nighthold better. And in many ways, the OG world bosses that were out last September, those were meant to complement the Emerald Nightmare tier. And that's kind of where that loot remains. If you get to a point where you no longer feel like that loot's worth your time, that's totally fine. That's how world bosses have been throughout the history of WoW. Though I think when Wither Gym is up, you're probably still going to go there to try to roll the dice for the Arcana Crystal. So there's that.
Okay.
He's up right now, by the way. Just spoiler alert.
Yep.
Right this very moment.
Yes, he is.
Classic Jim, man.
Oh, Jim. What a guy. So, have you noticed anything when it comes to analytics or anything on your end that talks about the rate of players still completing dailies or going and hunting down those big world boss mobs, things like that, and even when it comes to the towers, going back to that, you were saying everyone trying to complete the mage tower because they want that skin and stuff, versus the other things. Like, were there certain things that you learned about all of the different events, since there's so many now and there's so much to do, where people gravitate more to versus other ones?
For sure, the weekly bonus events that we have in place definitely drive players towards some content versus others. Like, we can see a spike in Battleground participation when it's Battleground week, or a spike in Arena Skirmish participation when it's Skirmish week. This is Mythic Dungeon week right now, so there's tons of people doing Mythic Dungeons, also coupled with the fact that new raid tier just opens. There's also kind of a rush to get the extra loot from there. But yeah, I think overall, one of the things that's been great to see is a lot of more sustained participation with all the types of content over the course of the expansion. Dungeons, in a lot of ways, are probably the biggest success story of Legion compared to past expansions. If we look at dungeon participation in Warlords and Mists, in those expansions, there was a huge spike early on, like with every expansion, and then it really rapidly tailed off, because while the dungeons were still fun, there was nothing there keeping them relevant. Whereas in Legion, I think through a mix of adding new dungeons, updating the difficulty baseline and the rewards baseline of the dungeons, and having the Mythic Keystone system, we're really seeing tons of people continuing to do them as very much a parallel path or a complement to raiding for people who just like that small group gameplay.
It actually made me think of the old talent system where you said there's like so many options and yet everybody just does the same one. So it's like there really isn't that many options.
Right.
Pretty much. Yeah. I think, people have gotten very good at solving problems and finding the efficient solution. And then especially, it's this day and age with the internet, the efficient solution quickly propagates, whether you're talking about the meta in some game or in some other game, or just, how to grind whatever resource the fastest. That's what becomes the right answer. That's what we're constantly trying to fight against, to keep the experience varied and interesting.
So I am curious because in 7.25, there was the Deaths of Chromie scenario. Plural, I guess.
Yep.
And my question for that is, and I'm, I know we should be talking about mechanics and all that stuff, but look, you got me off track, Crendor. I gotta get on this. What's going on with them evil dragons? Because you keep bringing them back every time the Infinite Dragonflight's gone. They keep coming back, and I'm just letting you know that there better be a payoff in the end where it. Look, I need a conclusion to this story, because it's been an overarching theme literally since 1984. It has been around since before this game existed.
Dragons are cool. Yeah. Like, the dragons are probably going to keep coming back because they're cool. What's wrong with that?
Well, there's technically a lot wrong with that. At the end of Cataclysm, dragons lost all that reproduction stuff they do, but there's still dragon eggs, and there's still... Y'all, I got questions for you. What is going on over there with these dragons? Are we going to get some crazy dragon stuff? Because if they are cool, help me understand what's going to happen. Are we going to have more dragon story in the future?
I think that seems very likely. I mean, certainly when you're level 112, as we learned in the Chromie scenario, dragons are going to be very important. But, part of the storytelling and the world building, it's always this trick of balancing, the story we're telling now without completely closing off opportunities in the future. And, to some extent, they're literary devices, right? Yes, you killed Illidan back in Black Temple. He seemingly was defeated. But as we're planning out the framework of the Legion expansion, man, wouldn't it be awesome to have Illidan around, and wouldn't there be so many opportunities? Well, what if we tweak a couple of things? What if there's a little bit of retconning going on, but what if we open this door to let us tell an awesome new story? And I think similarly, it was never our intent back in Cataclysm to close the door forever on, okay, dragons are gone, there's never going to be any in the future, and we can't do anything again, no more dragon raid bosses, etc. But yes, we know there's rebuilding to do there if we want to ever focus the storyline around them in the same ways. But that said, certainly the Infinite Dragonflight and the Bronze time bending and all of that, that's always been a little bit of a whole space for rule breaking because of, all the timelines and all the possibilities there. And for something like this scenario that really was meant to be a standalone piece of content that really is evergreen, it's separate from the Legion expansion. It's not part of the Legion story at all. Mm-hmm. That's why it was set in Dragonblight, and there's only just a little thing that sends you there. That's why it doesn't give power rewards. We viewed it as something that players would go back and do, 5-6 years from now. You might pick up World of Warcraft and, oh, hey, let me go do this cool thing that is always relevant. You're always scaled to the same power level. And that's why it kind of stands apart in a lot of ways from the rest of the story we're telling right now.
Cool. Are there going to be more of those in the future? Because I genuinely think that's like a solid content addition, is to have something that just caps you at a level and says, go have fun with this story. And the more of those in the game, I think long term really helps with a lot of the problems that most MMORPGs have, which is like, I mean, I could go back to Ice Crown, but I don't wanna, right? And
yeah,
because there's no benefit for you except for like exploration and maybe going to kill the Lich King again if you want to do it solo now, because you can. But yeah, I definitely think that the addition of all these extras that are sort of a capped story that's by itself that you can experience anytime is a really, really great choice.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think one of the big questions for us actually was, even one of the lingering doubts right up until this came out was, well, did we screw up by not having some power reward here that made it mandatory? Will players actually do content just because it's fun and because they're curious to see where the story goes and how it ends? And the answer has been yes. Like, we added that one little breadcrumb quest that gives you artifact power just to kind of get your foot in the door. Then after that, we figured it's up to you. If this is fun and you want to keep going, keep going. If you're not having fun, stop, and that's fine. And we've seen tons and tons and tons of people jump in and go through the whole experience, which has been awesome.
So I have a question about pet battles.
All right.
So I've been seeing all these pet battle dungeons get added. And I've actually heard that they're pretty fun to do. And so, as someone who's never pet battled all that much, is there going to be...
Out. You're missing... What? Wait, you're the guy who hasn't pet battled?
Yeah. I don't know. Listen, that's why I'm asking this. Is there a way to get into pet battling that you're going to introduce that makes it easier to get into pet battling? Or should I just start pet battling right now because I just have to do it on my own?
I ignored it for the first probably 80% of Mr. Pandaria, and then kind of during the downtime at the end of the expansion, I just had this phase where I was like, okay, let me just see what this is all about, and just started working my way through it, and that just became an obsession for a couple of weeks. And I think that's how we see a lot of people engage with the system. So it's never too late.
That's probably what I'll do then. We're 80% in. It's my time.
Exactly. I don't know about that, but
I didn't start doing it until Warlords. It wasn't until Warlords I was like, I guess I'll go back and check this out. And it was because of the inclusion of the little pet area inside of your base.
Yep, exactly.
That I was like, oh, well, if it's going to give me the points and stuff anyway and help me level and give me things where I can buy stuff for my pets, I might as well try. And then it got me. It was like, and I was in. As we move more into the nethers of space.
Good luck.
And get to some of the crazier aspects of WoW lore that you can see. If you haven't read the Chronicle books, go read that because it's crazy. Those things are crazy. What are some things, like how wild would you personally want to see stuff get? Because there's the potential for it to go crazy town. And I kind of want to see something as radically different as Burning Crusade was to vanilla Warcraft.
Definitely crazier. I think there's a lot of untapped potential out there. Azeroth is a planet in a cosmos, and there are terrible void creatures out there and an entire unexplored set of worlds, and that's something I think we're looking forward to tapping into in the future. And I think it's always a sort of this challenge to show players something new but still keep it grounded enough that it feels like Warcraft, that doesn't feel like a totally different game. I think WoW and the Warcraft universe has always been, at its core, traditional high fantasy, but there have also been sci-fi elements, right? Certainly Burning Crusade was very prominent in those. Everything about the Draenei, the technological aspects of the Legion that we've seen a lot more of this expansion, and the fact that, it's high fantasy, yes, there's dragons and swords and magic, but there's also space and vessels that travel between worlds and civilizations that were refugees from another planet that came here. And so there's a lot of space to continue to explore in that regard, figuratively and literally.
Is Argus going to be like the Tannin jungle, or is it going to be you kind of growing off what the Tannin jungle was?
Current thinking is it's effectively the final, it's the patch zone experience. It's just writ large on a much larger scale. People have said in the past, have asked, we mentioned that we were going to Argus. Oh, like, you're not going to do a whole expansion around that? And honestly, no. I think it would have been rather monotonous as the setting for an expansion. It's an awesome place, but it's also a husk of a world that has been completely destroyed by the Legion over the course of millennia. And it's not a place where we could plausibly have the bright and happy zone. And, there's this whole separate civilization that's flourishing, that are interesting to interact with. And as part of the world building that we want to, have any sort of balanced expansion, you look at a place like Draenor, okay, brutal, savage world, but we also wanted to have the Arakoa, the rolling plains of Nagand, the different ecologies there to flesh it out and give you diversity. Argus simply doesn't really support that, and it couldn't support that. But man, is it a great place to cap off the Legion experience, the Legion progression.
Where do you see things ramping up to? Because as we take on bigger and bigger enemies, eventually, because let me, before I ask this question, let me just verify this with you, because I'm curious if this is something that if I'm crazy thinking or not. When Warcraft was first in its inception, and World of Warcraft, the original, and then Burning Crusade, and then as we moved into Lich King, it seemed like the big bad was Sargeras out in the void, like waiting for something to happen, and the various old gods were sort of the problems we had to deal with on the planet. As things have slowly developed over time, it appears more and more like the Burning Legion is a response to the old gods, and the out there in the void is the Void Lords and the things that are way worse than the Burning Legion, and so those are technically the big bads, and Sargeras and the Legion are kind of like, we're just trying to help, but we're doing it pretty crappily. Like, it feels like things have switched, and so with that said, as time goes on, I imagine we eventually will take on the Legion and beat the Legion and do all that stuff, but then there's more and more and more of those, like, levels of evil out there. So how do you see a level, I'm going to say level 130 raid of 20 taking on an Elder Lord of the Void? And like eventually, is there a place where it's like, okay, this is too wild. What do we do now?
Potentially. I think it's a slow ramp. I think that, player characters, and this is, I often hear and read like a complaint from players. I miss when I was just a humble adventurer and I wasn't the hero and I wasn't the champion of anything. And I was just, out in a big world as a faceless person. But the story has advanced beyond that. By definition, when you're level 90, level 100, you aren't just a faceless person. You have gone through, you've unraveled the plot of Ahn'Qiraj and behind the throne of Stormwind. You have defeated the Lich King. You have defeated great forces of evil and threats to the world. And increasingly, the player is a peer to superheroes like Thrall and like Jaina and Larian. You're kind of in that same space as a comrade. And we get stronger. The threats that we face, the threats that we're able to overcome also evolve. I think at the same time, we, try to bear in mind relative power scales. And, when we fought Deathwing, we had the aid of the dragon aspects to make that remotely a fair fight. We had the power of the dragon soul. It wasn't just us going and doing it. And that's also one of the things, that aside from the gameplay, raids serve to further the fiction there. Because, yes, of course, a single player could never hope to stand against the Lich King, could never hope to stand against Deathwing, unless you come back like 20 levels later. But at the time, when all of you gather you're the heroes of Azeroth with your artifact weapons and all of this, you can accomplish great things. But yes, right now, we couldn't stand alone against a Titan. We couldn't even begin to fathom the power of a Void Lord, but who knows what the future will hold. I'm
curious as to what the invasion points are. So I saw that's like a main thing under all this. So what are invasion points?
It's basically throughout Argus, the Legion has been assaulting Azeroth, but the Burning Crusade of Sargeras has also been about scouring other worlds across the galaxy. And so it's a big part of what Illidan and his demon hunters are all about. The mission that kicked off the whole expansion for Demon Hunters was trying to retrieve the Sargerite Keystone, the key to all worlds, so that Illidan and his cadre of Demon Hunters could pursue them and fight them where they could find them. And so what we find on Argus is a Legion portal network where the Legion is actually assaulting other worlds. And so when you go through these portals, using a rift stone that you'll recover from the wreckage of Kil'jaeden's ship, which crashed on Argus, you're actually getting little glimpses of all new planets, all new worlds around the cosmos, just a tiny little piece of them as you go through behind the Legion invasion force, clear them out, fight a boss that comes through after you, do a little holdout event, and complete an objective there. And it's just, something that varies both the pace of your gameplay and the setting. As I mentioned earlier, in the context of Argus not being something that could really support an entire expansion, ultimately, the story of Argus dictates that it is a broken, ruined world. It can also be kind of oppressive to spend all the time there. And so this is also a way, along with telling a cool story and varying the gameplay, to get you into a lush jungle or a swamp or a volcanic fiery world and show you some different settings as you continue to thwart the Legion at every turn.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. So does that mean then that Argus is this the last time we're going to be there? Is this sort of like, okay, well, you got to see what it's like there, we're done, moving on? Or is this sort of the period on that, or is there more that we'll see?
What's happening on Argus is, very much the culmination of Azeroth's defense against the threat the Legion poses. As, late in Tomb of Sargeras, after you have defeated the Avatar of Sargeras, there's, this conversation between Khadgar and Velen and Illidan about, whether, okay, we've sealed the portal. Have we won our safety, or no? Is that just a brief respite? And they're still going to come and destroy us. Is the only way to end this threat to chase them down, destroy them at their home where we can find them. That's the story of Argus now. Could Argus be used for something else in the future? Who knows, right? Of course, it's a very important location. It's the home world of the Draenei, a very powerful, important place. But the purpose it serves in the Legion story is pretty much the period that you described.
And I guess if I had to ask one more question about everything that's happened in Legion, everything that, I guess, character-wise we've seen so far, I know it's been the consistent answer of every time this question has ever been asked when it comes to characters, is there's only so much time we have to develop the different stories of the million characters that are in the lore. So, with that said, though, I'm curious about, I remember when the soundtrack for Legion first came out, and there was maybe 14 Anduin songs on there, and dude didn't show up until recently. There was a comic about him, and they're off on a space adventure. There are all these different things about that one character that we didn't, he didn't really get added to the story until recently. There's also all these other major characters that as we move more and more off planet, their story seems to fall to the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
And we are now starting to see, again, thanks for the spoils, internet, Trillian and Illyria and all these characters people have wanted forever. So as new characters come back and old characters return, are you maybe considering taking those characters that are often unused and putting them in sort of a Chromie scenario and giving them their own stories if people want to go back and adventure with them? Or are they just on hold for the moment?
I think mostly the latter. You saw Wrathion in the Chromie scenario,
right?
A little cameo there. But I think, when it comes to big faction leaders, what is Anduin's focus right now? What's Sylvanas up to? I think the story that we're telling, certainly in the second half of Legion, it kind of transcends faction for a bit. This is one of those times where really it's Khadgar and it's Illidan and it's Velen who are, sort of the champions that we're following into battle. And we've set those concerns aside. Certainly Alliance and Horde are not on friendly terms and aren't going to be. But it's more about these unifying characters that are driving the plot forward because it's the people of Azeroth fighting to save our world. That's definitely not to say that that's not going to come back and that those characters won't step out into the forefront again. And I think take turns as the narrative shifts.
I have one very important final question. At the Dark Moon Fair, will you add a roller coaster?
That feels like an appropriate and cool thing to add at some point. They need to figure it out. But yeah, that seems like the place that if a roller coaster were ever going to exist, that would be where it would be.
Why stop there? Why don't we have a Dark Moon Fair editor? Some sort of Dark Moon Fair tycoon where take everything we learned from your bases in Warlords, take everything we've learned from Construct, and you just make your own Dark Fair. I'm not saying we're just giving you guys free ideas now, but
you kind of are.
Yeah, I would take that. I would say Dark Moon Fair Tycoon needs to be a mini game. Why is that not happening?
I can't even begin to answer that question.
That's why we need to be
hard hitting. We ask the hard hitting questions here.
Yeah, somehow
we need to be there every day.
To us.
Yeah, just giving you guys amazing ideas. Really, really padding the game with what people want. Yeah.
Appreciate it. I'll make sure when that goes in, I'll make sure everyone knows. It's like instead of making these 2 raid tiers, I did this interview and we just had this inspiring idea. We figured this would be the place that we'd spend all of our art resources this patch. I'm sure it'll go well.
Yeah.
You joke, but just you wait. People will be like, what? I can make my own fair? That'd be it. Then you can invite your friends. That's the player house people always wanted. They didn't know they wanted it. Making their own fair on the Isle.
Nothing says Warcraft like making roller coasters. It's true.
Exactly.
Going forward, absolutely. That's Warcraft from now on. All right. Well, watch this segue. This has been a roller coaster. Thank you,
Wow.
Ian, thank you for joining us and answering our insane questions about all sorts of topics that we just sort of were really interested in. I don't know if the rest of the world was interested, but we wanted to know answers to these things, so we got what we wanted.
Awesome. No, it's been a pleasure as always, guys.
Where's the payoff? Bring the strippers and booze. We do occasionally talk about video games. Bring the strippers and booze. Not enough time for video games. Bring the strippers and booze.
Oh, thank God, I don't need pants now.
Hey, JC, what are you doing? Not much. Making a fortune.
It's a production of broadcast.
Yeah, now sing music.
It's a production of broadcast.
Bring the strippers and booze.
It's a production of broadcast.
I'm here to ask and answer one simple question.
It's a production of broadcast.